What if one of World War II's darkest secrets didn't happen on the battlefield, but inside Japan's prison camps? Among the captives were young Dutch boys, taken from their families in the Dutch East Indies, locked behind barbed wire, and forced into routines that stripped away their names, their childhood, and their humanity. Some were beaten, others were disciplined in ways that still haunt the survivors' memories. For decades, almost no one spoke of it. The story remained buried until the survivors finally broke their silence. Drop the time you're watching this in the comments, morning, midnight, it doesn't matter. And if you want more history, the world tried to erase, subscribe no pressure. But the next chapter goes even deeper.
We'll miss you.
You wake up one morning and the world just feels wrong. The air's too still, the grown-ups too quiet, like everyone's holding their breath at the same time. Somewhere far off, you hear a sound deep steady like thunder that doesn't end. It's not thunder, it's planes. You're just a Dutch boy in the East Indies, maybe 12, maybe 13. You've never even been on an airplane, but now there are dozens of them flying so low you can see the red circles painted on their wings. People are running, shouting names, dragging suitcases that keep spilling open. You don't really understand what's happening, just that it's bad, and it's happening fast. The Japanese army rolls in before lunch. One minute you're watching palm trees sway in the heat. The next, soldiers in strange uniforms are shouting orders you don't understand. The men in your neighborhood, shopkeepers, teachers, even your dad try to stand tall, but they're quickly pushed aside. Someone slaps a man who speaks out. Someone else cries. And just like that, everything that felt normal yesterday disappears. Your father used to say things like, "The Dutch always take care of their own," but now he's gone taken somewhere for questioning. Your mother tries to keep you calm, but you can see the fear behind her eyes. One morning, soldiers come to your door. They point, shout, grab. You barely have time to throw some clothes into a small bag. You want to ask where you're going, but you already know it doesn't matter. They march you down a road lined with barbed wire. The sun beats down so hard, it feels like your skin might peel off. You see other boys your age, barefoot, confused, too tired to cry. Someone whispers the word camp. You think maybe it's like the ones you read about in school, tense fire songs. But this camp has no songs. When you walk through the gate, everything smells like smoke and sweat. The guards yell numbers, not names. You realize nobody here calls you you anymore. You're just a body that has to line up, move, sit, work. One of the older boys tells you not to look the guards in the eye, not to talk unless you're spoken to. You nod, even though you don't understand why. At night, you lie on a thin mat that smells like mold. There are so many people packed into one hut that you can't even stretch your legs. Mosquitoes buzz in your ears. Someone snores. Someone else whispers a prayer. You close your eyes and pretend you're home again. Pretend you can still hear your mother humming while she washes clothes. But the sound that fills your head isn't her voice anymore. It's the steady crunch of boots on dirt coming closer. Days start to blend together. Morning roll call, punishments, chores, the endless heat. You start counting time by meals, except sometimes there's no meal at all. The guards laugh when you ask for more. You learn to eat slow, to save every grain of rice, like it's gold. Sometimes in the middle of the night, you wake up and forget where you are. For a second, you think you're back in your own bed. Then you feel the rough bamboo floor and the itch of your dirty clothes, and you remember, you're not home. You don't even know if you have one anymore. And as strange as it sounds, the scariest part isn't the shouting or the punishments. It's how fast you start to get used to it. You stop being a person the day they take away your name. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small, sharp moments. A guard shouts a number, and you don't answer fast enough. The bamboo stick comes down hard on your shoulder. Again he yells. You say the number this time. Louder. He nods and walks off. That's it. That's your name now. A number. It hangs from a little tag around your neck, swinging when you walk. You try not to think about what happened to the last boy who lost his tag. Someone says he was sent away. No one ever saw him again. You keep your tag safe, like it's your heartbeat. Funny how something so small can decide if you live or not. Inside the camp, everything runs on numbers. You line up by number. You eat by number. You even breathe by number. At least it feels that way. The guards bark commands in Japanese, and if you don't move fast enough, you'll learn what the bamboo stick feels like again. After a while, the sound of it hitting skin doesn't even shock you anymore. It's just part of the air. There's no mirror in the camp, but you still notice how fast everyone's changing. The boys who used to talk about their bikes, their dogs, their favorite candies, they stop talking altogether. You see their eyes go blank. The spark that made them just fades out. And you realize yours is fading too. Sometimes when you catch your reflection in a bucket of water, you don't recognize your own face. The sun has burned your skin. Your hair's full of dust. Your cheeks are hollow. You look like someone older. Someone who's seen too much. You try to smile once just to see if you still can. It feels wrong, like your face forgot how. There's one boy, Peter. He's maybe 14. He tries to keep everyone's spirits up. He hums old Dutch songs when the guards aren't listening. You want to believe it helps. One night, he gives you half his rice because you're shaking too much to stand. The next morning, he's gone. No one says anything. No one dares to ask. That's how you learn. Another rule of the camp. Kindness is dangerous. You start moving like everyone else. Quiet, careful eyes down. You figure out that every guard has a different rhythm. The tall one with the scar likes order. If you keep your bed straight, he leaves you alone. The younger one enjoys surprises. He'll knock over your bowl just to watch you scramble. You learn their habits the way you once learned your school lessons. Because now, this is your education. You try to remember your last day of school back home. The teacher talking about world maps, about how the Netherlands ruled over lands far away. You almost laugh at the memory. Here you're the ruled one. You're the enemy, even though you're just a kid. Sometimes you catch yourself wondering how long can someone live without being seen as a person. You don't say it out loud, of course. You just keep walking, clutching your tag, repeating your number in your head. It's the only thing the guards want to hear from you, and for now, it's the only thing that keeps you alive. The place they send you to next doesn't even look real. It sits out in the middle of nowhere, just dirt bamboo fences and a few crooked huts leaning under the sun like they're about to collapse. You'd think this kind of place couldn't possibly exist, not even in wartime. But it does. And you're standing right in front of it. They call it a camp, but it's really a cage. Every corner smells like smoke and sweat, like something burned a long time ago and never stopped burning. You can hear the guards laughing near the gate, the clatter of tin bowls, the faint crying of someone trying not to be heard. It's the kind of sound that sinks into your bones even when the night goes quiet. The huts are built from split bamboo thin as paper. The roofs leak when it rains, and when the wind blows, dust fills your nose until you can't breathe. The ground turns to mud that sticks to your legs. You sleep on straw mats so thin you can feel the floorboards through them. The lucky ones have a blanket. The rest just curl up and try not to shake. You soon realize the rules here aren't really rules, they're moods. One guard likes to see everyone run. Another likes to make you stand still for hours in the sun. They change their minds like the weather, and somehow you're always wrong. You learn to read their faces the way sailors read the sky. One wrong look, and the storm hits. Once a boy from another hut trips during roll call, just slips on the mud. The guard doesn't care why. He makes everyone stand in the heat for half the day while the boy kneels in the dirt. By the time it's over, the boy can't move his legs. You want to help, but you know better. In this place, helping can get you punished too. You start to notice how small your worlds become. The fence, the huts, the path to the latrine, that's it. That's your entire universe now. Beyond the bamboo, you can see palm trees swaying and birds gliding in the distance, like another life is still happening out there. You catch yourself wondering if the war forgot about you, or if it remembers you too well. Sometimes, you think about the stories your father used to tell, about explorers, sailors, and brave men who faced the unknown. You used to think you'd be one of them someday, but standing here barefoot in the dirt, you realize courage doesn't look like what you imagine. It doesn't shout or fight. Sometimes it just stands still, stays quiet, and waits for the shouting to stop. You and the other boys start inventing small ways to stay sane. Someone draws shapes in the dirt with a stick. Another hums a tune he barely remembers. You talk about food, about home, about things that don't exist anymore. It's not much, but it's something to hold on to. Because in a place like this, imagination is the last thing they haven't taken. And when night falls, you stare up through the gaps in the roof, watching stars flicker between the bamboo. They look close enough to touch, and for a second, you almost forget the fences. Almost. You think you've seen the worst already, until you see what they do to the boys. That's the hook of this place, isn't it? Every time you think it can't get crueler, it finds a new way to prove you wrong. At first, it's small things. They shave your head, take your shoes, and call it discipline. Then come the work details, hauling buckets of water, carrying bamboo poles taller than you, digging trenches that seem to lead nowhere. The guards call it training. You call it what it is, survival by obedience. But there's a moment that changes everything. One morning, the commander decides that the younger boys aren't working hard enough. So he lines everyone up in the yard and makes a show of it. He calls it a lesson. You can feel the heat rising off the ground as he paces back and forth, explaining in broken English how laziness is the enemy. Then he points to a boy named John, small, quiet, barely 13. John doesn't understand what's happening until the guard yells at him to step forward. He freezes. Just for a second, but it's long enough. The guard grabs him by the collar, drags him to the front, and starts shouting in Japanese. Nobody moves. You can't. You just stand there watching as they make an example out of him. Afterward, no one talks about it. Not out loud. But you can see it in everyone's eyes, that look that says, We're not children anymore. It's the moment innocence burns out for good. From then on, you stop thinking in days. You think in tasks. If I can finish this bucket run without slipping, if I can make it through the next roll call without coughing, that's how you measure time now. Not by sunrise or sunset, but by how many small humiliations you can survive before collapsing. There's a rumor that the guards get bored easily, that the punishments are less about rules and more about entertainment. Some boys are forced to hold heavy buckets over their heads until their arms go numb. Others have to crawl across gravel for dropping a bowl. You learn that dignity is a luxury you can't afford here. Sometimes you catch yourself wondering what the guards see when they look at you. Do they see an enemy, a nuisance, or just something to break for sport? You want to hate them, but after a while, hate feels too heavy to carry. What you feel instead is emptiness, quiet, blank, almost peaceful in a strange way, like your mind is trying to protect you by shutting the lights off inside. One evening, a storm hits. Rain pounds on the roofs like gunfire. You're soaked, but for once, the guards stay inside their huts, yelling less than usual. You and a few boys huddle together, whispering nonsense, anything to sound alive. Someone starts humming again softly like an echo of home. You close your eyes and imagine your mother's voice mixing with the rain. And that's when you realize something new. The worst part of this place isn't the pain. It's how fast you start to forget the sound of love. After a while, you start to notice things, the little patterns that decide whether you make it through the day or not. The guards don't just shout for no reason. There's a rhythm to it, like a dark kind of music. One tone means move faster, another means don't even look up. You learn these sounds by instinct. It's like developing a sixth sense made out of fear. You can tell which guard is coming just from the sound of his footsteps. The tall one with the scar drags his right boot slightly. The younger one taps the ground like he's keeping time with an invisible drum. You memorize every sound, every breath, because one wrong move could ruin your entire day. It's strange how fear becomes a language of its own. You don't need to know Japanese anymore. You just need to know when to freeze, when to stay small, when to disappear into the crowd. The older boys call it reading the weather. One look at the guard's face, and you already know if the day will be cloudy or if the storm's coming. The hardest part isn't the shouting, it's the silence after. When the guard walks away, and all you can hear is the sound of your own breathing. That's when the fear really settles in, like it's waiting inside you. You learn to hold it, carry it, hide it under your ribs. It's always there, even when you smile. Sometimes, new prisoners arrive, Dutch men from other camps, some old, some barely adults. They walk in like ghosts, faces blank, eyes hollow. You stare at them and realize they're what you'll look like soon. It's like seeing your future walk past you in slow motion. Every so often, someone gets brave, just for a second. A boy talks back. A man refuses to bow. You can feel the air change when it happens. Everyone goes still, waiting for the punishment that always comes next. You want to cheer for them, but you can't even breathe. By the end of it, nobody says a word. Courage gets buried fast here. At night, you and the others whisper to each other about food bread, butter-warm soup. You describe it in such detail, you can almost taste it. One boy, Eric, swears he'll eat 20 pancakes the day he's free. You laugh just a little, even though it hurts to do it. Somehow, that small laugh feels like defiance, like a secret no one can steal. Sometimes, when a guard walks past, you look at him and wonder what his life is like beyond the fence. Does he have a family? A kid your age? Does he go home and forget all of this? Or does it haunt him too? You'll never know. But the thought keeps you human somehow. There's a night when you wake up suddenly heart-pounding. You don't know why, until you realize what's missing. The usual shouting, the boots, the barking orders. For the first time in months, the camp is completely still. The silence is so heavy, it almost feels kind. You lie there listening to the quiet, afraid to move in case it breaks. And for a second, you let yourself believe that maybe the war has stopped. It hasn't. But for that one brief, breathless moment, it feels like peace remembered what you sound like. You'd think nothing could surprise you anymore, but the camp always finds new ways to test that theory. One morning, they make everyone line up early, before sunrise. The sky is still gray, the air cold enough that your breath comes out in clouds. No one knows what's happening. The guards stand in a row, too quiet, too calm. That's never a good sign. The commander steps forward and says something in Japanese. One of the interpreters, an older prisoner, translates. Today, he says, you will learn discipline. Everyone stares at him, not sure if that means more chores or another punishment. Then the guards start bringing out barrels of water, bamboo sticks, and a wooden frame that looks like a cross between a bench and a trap. You realize they're setting up for something. A demonstration, maybe. You're forced to stand and watch as they call a few boys to the front, Dutch boys, just like you. The commander says it's for training, but no one believes that. He starts shouting orders, using the boys as examples. You see, he says through the interpreter, this is how soldiers are made, through obedience, through pain. The boys have to hold buckets filled with water above their heads until their arms shake. One by one they drop them, and the guards laugh. The commander doesn't stop. He makes them start over. It goes on for hours. You want to look away, but you can't. The guards are watching the crowd, waiting for someone to react. So you stare straight ahead, pretending to be numb. When it's over, one boy collapses. The commander waves his hand like it's nothing. The guards drag the boy away, and that's the end of the lesson. Later, when you walk back to your hut, you can still hear the commander's words echoing in your head, through obedience, through pain. After that day, everything in the camp feels different. The guards don't need to hit you as much anymore. They've already won. You obey before they even speak. It's like your body moves on its own, now faster than your thoughts. You're scared of how natural it feels. One of the older prisoners, a man who used to be a teacher, whispers something to you one night. They're not just punishing us, he says. They're studying us. They want to see how much the human spirit can take before it breaks. You don't know if that's true, but it sounds right. It would explain the strange routines, the sudden drills, the way the guards watch you, not with anger, but curiosity. The next week, the commander calls it education. He has the boys march in circles under the sun for hours, chanting Japanese words none of you understand. Discipline, the interpreter says again. Endurance. You almost laugh at how absurd it sounds, like they're pretending this horror is some kind of moral lesson. And yet you notice something strange in yourself. You've learned how to endure, how to keep breathing when your lungs ache, how to stand perfectly still when your legs burn. You're not proud of it, but it's survival. And survival here feels like rebellion. Later that night, lying awake, you think about that word, discipline. Back home, it meant finishing your homework, keeping your room clean. Here, it means learning to disappear inside yourself just enough to stay alive. And somehow, that quiet skill, the ability to endure without being seen, becomes your only superpower. Somewhere along the line, fear stops being the only thing that fills the air. Something else sneaks in, something small, quiet, and almost impossible to notice at first. Hope. Not the loud kind that shouts about freedom, but the whispering kind that hides in corners and survives in secrets. It starts with a piece of paper, just a torn scrap, really part of an old newspaper someone found near the trash pit. There's Dutch writing on it, faded and smudged. One of the older boys. Hendrik stares at it for a long time, then smiles in a way you haven't seen in months. That night, when the guards are asleep, he gathers a few of you near the back of the hut and whispers, "We're starting a school." At first, everyone laughs. A school in a place like this? But he's serious. He starts by teaching a few words, some math problems. He remembers a poem his mother used to recite. You take turns repeating lines until they stick in your head. It's nothing fancy, no books, no pencils, just memory. But for the first time in forever, your mind feels awake again. Soon, more boys join in. Someone scratches letters into the dirt with a stick. Someone else keeps watch by the door, ready to whisper guard if footsteps come too close. You call it the Bamboo School. It's not just about learning. It's about remembering that you still exist beyond your number tag. Hendrik makes you memorize lines from Dutch poems. He says words are like seeds. Even in bad soil, some will grow. You don't really get what he means until one night he recites a verse so softly that it feels like a prayer. Even in darkness, there's still the sound of wings. No one speaks after that. You all just sit there breathing in the silence, like it's oxygen. The next day, everything feels a little different. The guards still shout, the sun still burns, but somewhere deep inside you're carrying those words with you. They don't change your hunger or your pain, but they give it shape, meaning. Sometimes you and a few others whisper Dutch words during work, simple things like bread, home see. Just hearing your own language feels like a tiny rebellion. The guards think you're mumbling nonsense. You know better. It's memory disguised as survival. One night, Hendrik doesn't show up. You wait listening for his footsteps, but he never comes. The next morning, the guards are dragging something through the yard. You don't ask questions, you already know. The Bamboo School goes quiet for a few days after that. No lessons, no poems, just silence and the sound of rain dripping through the roof. But then one boy starts humming again, just softly, the tune Hendrik used to hum while teaching. Another joins in, then another. Before long, the whole hut is whispering the song under their breath, each voice barely audible. It isn't loud, it isn't bold, but it's something the guards can't stop. That's the thing about hope here. It doesn't roar, it rustles. It hides in whispered poems and half-remembered songs. It sneaks past fences. It refuses to die. Hunger becomes the one thing that never leaves you. It sits in your belly, like a second heart, always beating, always reminding you it's still there. You dream about food the way people dream about love. Warm bread, melted butter, even a plain potato feels like something holy now. Each morning, they hand you a small bowl of rice, barely enough to cover the bottom. You count every grain like it's gold. Some days, the rice smells sour. Other days, it's half raw, but you eat it anyway. You have to. You start chewing slower, trying to trick your brain into thinking there's more than there is. Hunger turns you into a magician. creating illusions out of crumbs. It's not just hunger, though. Your body starts changing in ways you can't control. Your ribs stick out like ladder rungs. Your legs shake when you walk too long. You watch your friends shrink into shadows of themselves. Even your voice gets quieter, like it's running out of strength too. Then comes the sickness. First, it's just coughs and fevers. But soon people can't get up anymore. The huts smell like sweat and sickness mixed together. The guards don't care, they just drag the sick outside and leave them in a separate shed. You stop asking what happens next. You already know. Sometimes you wake up and realize the person lying next to you isn't breathing. You stare at them for a long time, trying to understand how someone can be there 1 second and gone the next. You want to cry, but your body's too tired to make tears. You just turn away, because that's the only thing you can do. One afternoon, you see a guard toss away a piece of bread. It lands in the dirt. Without thinking, 3 boys run for it at the same time. They crash into each other, scrambling like animals. You want to look away, but you can't. One of them wins, if you can call it that, and shoves the muddy bread into his mouth before the others can grab it. You can't even blame him. You do the same. Hunger makes everyone equal. Sometimes when the fever hits, you start seeing things. Shapes in the air. Shadows that look like your mother's face. Once you swear, you hear her voice calling your name. You whisper back, but it's just the wind through the cracks in the bamboo. In moments like that, you realize the real enemy here isn't Japan. It's not even the guards. It's hunger itself, the kind that eats from the inside, that gnaws at your strength, your thoughts, your will to keep breathing. But somehow, you do keep breathing. Every morning you open your eyes and think, just one more day. You say it over and over like a prayer. Sometimes it feels meaningless, but other times it feels like the only thing keeping you alive. Then one night, something strange happens. It rains hard for hours. You put out an old tin bowl to catch the water. By morning it's full, and the air smells clean again. You take a sip, cold, fresh, real, and it feels like tasting life itself. You laugh quietly, not because anything's funny, but because you're still here. In a place that's built to destroy you, that's no small thing. You always imagined freedom would feel loud, cheering, singing people running through open gates. But when it finally comes, it's quiet. So quiet it doesn't even feel real. One morning, you wake up to find the guards gone. No shouting, no roll call, no orders. The gate stands open, swinging gently in the breeze. For a long time, nobody moves. Everyone's afraid it's a trick. Then slowly, one man steps forward, then another. Then everyone starts walking out of the huts, out of the yard, out of the nightmare that stole years from your life. The sunlight outside hits you like a wall. It's too bright, too clean, almost painful, after so many months under bamboo roofs. The air smells like the sea again. You stand there blinking, trying to remember what it felt like to breathe without fear. You'd think that would be the end of it. That the moment the gate opened, everything inside, you would switch back on. But it doesn't. You're free, yes, but you don't feel like the boy who walked in. You left him somewhere behind those fences, and what's left is someone quieter, smaller, older. The soldiers who find you wear different uniforms. They give you food, real food, and you almost cry when you taste it. Bread-warm soup water that doesn't smell like rust. But your stomach isn't used to eating anymore. The first few bites make you sick. You hold the bowl anyway, refusing to let go, because it feels like holding proof that you're still alive. They move you to a recovery camp, a safer one this time, run by people who speak gently and don't carry bamboo sticks. You sleep in clean beds. There are doctors, nurses, volunteers. Some of them smile at you like they mean it. But even surrounded by kindness, the quiet follows you. You notice it in the other boys too. The way they flinch when someone drops a cup. The way they eat too fast, afraid the food will vanish. At night, you still wake up expecting to hear a guard's voice. Your body's free, but your mind doesn't believe it yet. One day, a nurse gives you a mirror. You hesitate before looking. When you finally do, you barely recognize the face, staring back, thin, sunburned eyes, too old for the rest of you. You touch your cheek like you're meeting yourself for the first time. They tell you the war is over. Japan surrendered. The world is moving on. You nod, but you don't know what moving on means anymore. You're still learning how to live without counting footsteps or memorizing the sound of anger. Weeks pass, and one morning a man from your old town finds you. He's looking for survivors. He says he knew your family. You ask about your father, your mother. He looks away. You already know the answer. Later that night, sitting by the window, you watch the sunset over the same land that held you prisoner. It's beautiful, in a way you almost forgot soft light on the palm trees, birds flying low over the fields. For the first time you realize beauty and pain can live in the same place. You're free, yes. But the freedom you have now isn't the kind you dreamed about. It's quieter, heavier. It carries everything you saw, everything you lost. And yet somehow it still asks you to keep going. Because even after everything, the world hasn't ended, and neither have you. Years later, people start asking questions. Journalists, historians, strangers with notebooks, they all want to know what it was like. They call it a dark chapter, as if darkness could ever fit neatly between two bookends. You sit there older now, hands folded in your lap, trying to find words big enough to hold what happened. You never really can. They ask, how did you survive? And you almost laugh. Because you don't remember how. You just did. One breath at a time. One day after another. Like climbing out of a pit so deep, you stopped wondering where the top was. Some days, it feels like a story that happened to someone else. But then you hear a sound, a dog barking a metal gate, slamming, and for half a second, you're back there. The heat, the smell, the shouts, your chest tightens, and suddenly the years in between feel paper thin. You visit a courtroom once after the war trials begin. You watch the men who ran the camp sit in their clean uniforms, eyes down, faces blank. The translator says words like war crimes, human rights, and responsibility. You want to believe justice means something, but looking at them, you can't tell if it ever will. When the verdict is read, people clap. You don't. Justice can't rewind time. It can't give you back your family or the boy you used to be. At night, you sometimes dream of the camp, not as it was, but as it should have been. The huts are gone. The fences are flowers. The guards vanish like smoke, and the boys laugh again, running barefoot in the grass. You wake up with tears on your face and can't tell if it's sadness or relief. Maybe both. People call you a survivor, but that word never fits right. It sounds too clean, too heroic. Surviving wasn't noble. It was messy, desperate, instinctive. You didn't survive because of courage. You survived because your body refused to quit. Because even when your mind broke something deep inside, you whispered, just one more day. Sometimes you try to write it all down. You start with a sentence, then stop. The memories are heavy, slippery, too alive to trap on paper. But you keep trying, because if you don't, it feels like those boys, Peter, Jan, Hendrik, might fade for good. So you write their names. You say them out loud in an empty room. You remember the songs, the whispered poems, the tiny rebellions that kept you human. You realize now that survival wasn't the end of your story. It was the beginning of learning how to live with ghosts. When people ask if you forgive, you pause. You don't say yes. You don't say no. You just say, I remember. Because remembering is the only kind of justice that lasts. And when you walk past a playground, hearing children laugh under a bright sky, you stop for a moment and smile. Not because the past is gone, but because you finally understand life went on, just like the rain, just like the wind, just like those stars you used to watch through the cracks in the roof. You survived. You carried the story. You made sure the world could never say we didn't know. They were just boys, innocent, forgotten, forced to survive a war that turned children into numbers. Their pain was buried, their stories nearly erased. But behind every silence, history whispers. And now, as we leave the Dutch boys' camps behind, another horror waits in the shadows. The comfort women of Wwii, the dark truth. Japan tried to erase. You know that eerie calm right before a storm hits. The air goes still, dogs stop barking, and somewhere deep inside, you just feel something's about to change. That's what Japan felt like in the 1930s, except the storm wasn't made of rain. It was made of ambition. You walk through Tokyo's narrow alleys, past paper lanterns swaying in the night breeze, and you can almost hear the hum of the rising empire. Factories never sleep. Newspapers praise the emperor like a pop idol, and every classroom drills loyalty into the next generation with the same rhythm as a military march. The government tells people Japan is running out of space, that the empire needs living room, like a family claiming the neighbor's garden because theirs got too small. And when people believe that war stops feeling like violence, it starts feeling like duty. You overhear young men at tea houses bragging about joining the army, their mothers wiping tears with proud smiles, and even schoolgirls dream about soldiers the way people today dream about celebrities. Nobody dares to question the direction of the wind. After all, when the emperor's picture hangs in every home, you don't argue with the wallpaper. Behind closed doors, Japan's leaders, Tojo Konoe, and a circle of generals plan their expansion, like a corporation mapping out new markets. They talk about Korea, Manchuria, China, the Philippines. Each one a territory of opportunity. But expansion isn't just about soldiers or resources. It's about control over bodies, over minds, over stories. They know that if men are to fight endlessly, they must be kept obedient, comfortable, and yes, satisfied. That's where the first whispers begin. Plans to establish comfort facilities to maintain morale. You pass a row of printing houses, where new propaganda posters roll off the presses, a soldier smiling under a cherry blossom tree, his rifle gleaming.
Know that I stand with
The caption reads, "For the Emperor's honor." It's polished, poetic, and entirely hollow. On the streets, people hum marching songs that sound like lullabies. Even laughter feels rehearsed. Everything is becoming part of the same theater, and nobody notices how the stage lights start to burn. Walk a bit further, and you'll notice something odd. Police keep a closer eye on foreigners, especially Koreans and Chinese. Newspapers begin avoiding uncomfortable topics. A journalist who once wrote about poverty suddenly vanishes. His desk, cleared as byline, gone. Censorship once quiet, now walks with heavy boots. You can't say what you see anymore. You can only repeat what you're told. In small seaside towns, military recruiters start showing up at schools promising adventure to boys and opportunity to girls. The language is vague, deliberately so. Serve the nation, they say, and you'll bring honor to your family. It sounds noble, but behind the slogans, something darker brews a machinery of deception that will soon stretch across Asia. Even the streets themselves begin to change. Where there were shrines and markets now, there are military supply depots. Train whistles echo like warnings. Soldiers in pressed uniforms march by their boots, synchronized like ticking clocks. The country is awake, but it's not the kind of awakening you'd want to witness. You might compare it to a modern workplace that calls itself a family while quietly working everyone to exhaustion. The same mix of pride and quiet fear. You step into a small noodle shop near Yokohama. The owner keeps glancing toward the radio volume low, as if the airwaves themselves could report him. The newsreader's voice is calm. Japan will bring peace to Asia. That word peace gets thrown around a lot these days. It's amazing how often people use peace to justify the opposite. Everywhere you look, there's a sense of movement, of something inevitable, as if Japan is a train no one can stop. You hear talk of the Greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, a polite way of saying empire. It's dressed in words like harmony, destiny, brotherhood, yet the unspoken truth is conquest. And in the midst of this growing storm, women vanish into footnotes. They aren't the generals or politicians, so they're invisible in the story's opening act. But that's the trick history loves to play. It hides its darkest chapters behind its loudest applause. As night falls over Tokyo, the city glows with the light of ambition. You can almost hear the ticking of typewriters drafting new laws, the rustle of military reports detailing how to manage conquered lands. And in some faraway office, an officer sketches a chilling phrase that will soon become official policy, Ayanfu comfort women. You don't know it yet, but this is where everything begins. The empire's silence, tightening like a rope, the promises that will deceive the ships, that will take girls away from their homes, and the paper trails that will erase their names. The streetlights flicker. Somewhere a mother hums a lullaby. And you realize, before the empire enslaved other nations, it first enslaved its own silence. You wake up the next morning in a humid dawn somewhere along the Korean peninsula, 1939. The roosters crow, like they're trying to protest the empire themselves, but no one listens. A Japanese flag flutters from the police outpost at the edge of the village, and soldiers in khaki patrol the dirt road with that easy confidence that comes from knowing no one will dare meet their eyes. The empire has arrived, and it's not leaving anytime soon. From Manchuria to Taiwan, from Singapore to Burma, Japan's map is expanding faster than most people can keep up. Newspapers call it Asia, for Asians, a catchy slogan that sounds noble enough to put on a t-shirt today. But you and I both know how marketing works. When someone oversells unity, they're usually selling control. You pass a group of farmers heads down, whispering in their own language. A soldier yells at them for speaking incorrectly. Overnight, local languages are banned in schools, replaced by Japanese. Even prayers must sound imperial. It's like being forced to dream in someone else's tongue. You can almost taste the loss. It's bitter, like burnt rice. In every occupied region, Japan builds not just barracks and offices, but a system, one designed to keep everything and everyone in line. There are comfort stations for soldiers, re-education programs for civilians, and endless lists for supply chains that include everything from rifles to soap to women. You don't know the scale yet, but the list will grow until it stretches across the whole Pacific. The soldiers arrive first, waving small flags and handing out candy to children. It's always the same strategy, smiles before orders. A Japanese official gives a speech about cooperation, while his men quietly take note of which households have young daughters. The whole thing feels like a parade that forgot it's marching into war. You notice how quickly things change once the army moves in. Inns are converted into barracks, schools into command posts, temples into storage rooms. And then, without anyone saying it out loud, rooms begin to be prepared for something else. Comfort facilities, the notices say. The language is sterile, bureaucratic, the kind of phrase that hides its meaning behind politeness. It's incredible how evil always comes dressed in paperwork. A Korean teacher tells his students that they'll soon be offered opportunities to work for the empire. He doesn't believe it himself, but saying otherwise could get him arrested. The girls giggle, half flattered, half confused. Who wouldn't want a stable job in a time of war? The empire is clever that way. It doesn't conquer by sword alone. It conquers by script, by contract, by promise. Meanwhile, the Japanese soldiers themselves are drowning in exhaustion, hunger, and heat. They're told they're heroes, but their eyes say otherwise. Disease spreads fast, morale drops, and the commanders panic. So someone suggests creating a system of controlled comfort. Fewer assaults on civilians, less disease, more discipline. It sounds neat, organized, like a solution on paper. Except the solution is human. You imagine the first recruiters stepping off a train in Seoul or Nanjing civilian clothes, polite smiles forge documents. They blend in like traveling salesmen. They approach families, promise jobs for daughters, factory work, sewing, nursing, restaurant service. The wages sound generous. The contracts look official. The mothers, worried about hunger and bombings, think it might be a chance for their daughters to survive. In truth, they're signing them into disappearance. By 1940, these recruiters are everywhere, from the Philippines to Indonesia, even in remote mountain villages. They work fast, collecting hundreds, then thousands of young women. Some are tricked, some coerced, others outright taken by force. But all roads lead to the same system, built, funded, and defended by the Imperial Japanese Army. If you've ever walked through a busy market and lost sight of someone in the crowd, you know that sudden jolt of panic. Imagine that, but multiplied by thousands of families day after day who never see their daughters again. Parents go to the police, but the police are part of the same empire. There are no missing person reports, no investigations, only silence. Meanwhile, the propaganda machine works overtime. Posters declare that Japanese soldiers bring civilization. Pamphlets show soldiers helping children or tending to crops. It's as if every atrocity is being balanced with a smiling photo op. You can't help thinking about how easy it is even now for a photo to tell the opposite of the truth. And here's a detail. History doesn't often pause on not all the comfort stations were hidden. Some stood right next to military hospitals or command centers openly managed by officers' wives or local collaborators. There was no secret in the logistics, only in the humanity that was missing from them. From Tokyo's perspective, the system looks efficient. There are ledgers, timetables, medical inspections, and transport schedules. It's a whole economy built on bodies. But if you look closely, you'll see something else, the moral decay underneath the bureaucratic shine. It's like a clean white envelope that reeks the moment you open it. The empire calls it order, The occupied call it occupation, but both sides feel the same chill, the sense that something is deeply wrong. Even soldiers who follow orders begin to sense it, though they'd never say so aloud. In private diaries, some will later write that the comfort system made them feel dirty in victory. It's the kind of confession that shows up only when the war is already lost. And as the network spreads across Asia station after station, island after island, you begin to see the machinery of control working in perfect rhythm. It's not random cruelty. It's organized, deliberate, designed. And once it's running, no one seems to know how to stop it. You're standing in a crowded market, somewhere in colonial Korea, maybe 1941. The air smells of grilled mackerel and coal smoke, and for a moment, it feels like life still has its small comforts. But over the laughter and chatter, you spot a small wooden sign nailed to a post-employment opportunities for young women, sewing, nursing, factory work. Apply within. A promise written in neat Japanese characters painted just clean enough to look official. A group of girls gathers around it, giggling nervously, their hair tied neatly with ribbons, their shoes polished for the occasion. Most of them are barely out of school. Some whisper to each other that it might be a way to see the world. After all, the Empire says it needs skilled workers, modern women, to help build a new Asia. Even the village headman nods approvingly. It all sounds so patriotic, so safe, so ordinary. Then come the recruiters. They're smooth, polite, and oddly convincing, part businessman, part savior. One introduces himself as Mr. Tanaka, claiming to represent a textile company in Japan. He carries neat papers stamped with red seals, and when he smiles, parents relax. Your daughters will be fed, housed, and paid, he says. They'll help the Empire, and you'll receive monthly stipends. In a time when rice is scarce and fear is constant, it sounds like a miracle. Some girls even feel proud. Finally, a chance to earn money, maybe send some home, maybe escape their small villages. You can almost hear their laughter as they pack their few belongings: a comb, a family photo, a little pouch of rice for luck. Mothers fuss over them, telling them to behave, to write letters. Fathers stay silent, but their eyes glisten as the truck pulls away. But you and I both know how stories like this go. Once the engine starts, the world those girls knew disappears behind a curtain of dust. The recruiter's smile fades, and the further the truck rolls, the less the promises hold. At first, everything still feels vaguely legitimate. The girls are taken to a port, maybe in Busan or Shanghai, where they join others, hundreds, then thousands, lined up with luggage and ID cards. Soldiers with clipboards bark orders, while nurses take medical notes. But the tone is wrong. Too cold, too methodical. And when someone asks when they'll arrive at the factory, the answer is always soon. They board ships cramped and damp-packed like cargo. The smell of engine oil mixes with seawater and fear. Days stretch without explanation. Some girls cry quietly. Others stare blankly already, somewhere else in their minds. You can hear the clanking of metal chains, not on them, but around them, and the sound of the ship's doors locking from the outside. When they finally disembark, it isn't Japan waiting. It's a military base somewhere in the South Pacific, or the jungles of Burma, or a garrison in Nanjing. They're herded into barracks, handed numbers, and told, from now on, you serve the army. The words factory work vanish like a cruel joke. The uniforms they receive aren't for sewing, they're for submission. Some try to protest, insist there must be a mistake. But soldiers laugh. Others simply freeze disbelief, still masking the truth. Then comes the order, line up. They're inspected, documented, renamed. Their old papers are collected stamped invalid. The recruiters disappear into the night their job done. The Empire doesn't need their faces anymore, only the numbers they delivered. Back home, months pass, then years. Families wait for letters that never come. A few go to local officials, but the officials shrug. She must be working, they say. Be patient. In some villages, rumors start whispers that the girls were taken by the army, that they serve soldiers now. But no one dares speak, too loud. In occupied Korea, even grief must be polite. You might think such deception would collapse under its own weight, but it doesn't. The Empire keeps everything carefully managed. There are printed forms, transport permits, health reports, all filed under the comfort system. To outsiders, it looks legal. To insiders, it's invisible. It's like watching a magician pull endless scarves from his sleeve. You know it's a trick, but the audience applauds anyway. Here's a tragic irony. Some of the earliest testimonies after the war came not from the victims, but from Japanese doctors and soldiers. They admitted to inspecting women for sanitary purposes, to maintaining logs, to receiving orders from headquarters about quotas. Even in confession, they spoke like accountants. Numbers, not names. Schedules, not souls. If you squint, the story almost resembles something modern, like a corporate cover-up, where everyone insists they were just following procedure. You know that tone. The one that drains the life out of responsibility. That's exactly how the machinery of the comfort system worked. Polished, efficient, deniable. Every girl aboard those ships became a missing person the moment she crossed the water. Her name erased her hometown, forgotten her family, told nothing. By the time the system reached full scale, tens of thousands had vanished: Korean, Chinese, Filipina, Indonesian, Burmese, Dutch. The Empire had found a way to turn human beings into consumable logistics. And as if that weren't cruel enough, the language surrounding it made it sound gentle. Comfort women, volunteers, helpers of the army. You can't help but notice how often history sanitizes its own crimes. Call it comfort, and suddenly it sounds almost kind. But if you could stand on the dock where those ships once sailed, if you could listen closely, maybe you'd still hear it. The faint echo of a train whistle, a mother's sob, the silence of a name being crossed off a ledger. Because history doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just stops calling your name. What if I told you the word comfort was once used to describe some of the most terrifying rooms in modern history? It's like calling a prison a wellness center. The phrase "ianfu," comfort women, sounds harmless until you step inside one of those buildings and realize it was less a home and more a factory of obedience. You find yourself in a small, windowless room somewhere near a frontline base in Burma. The air is thick with disinfectant and damp heat. There's a single cot, a wash basin, and a calendar with red marks scrawled across each day. Everything is regulated, timed, recorded. Even suffering has a schedule here. Soldiers wait outside in long mechanical lines. The Empire has made sure each man knows his time slot, as if this were another military drill. An officer barks orders. A doctor scribbles notes. The system is clockwork perfection, cold, precise, and utterly dehumanizing. The women, they're barely holding on. Some are teenagers, others already fading behind glassy eyes. They clean themselves obsessively because inspections are frequent punishments harsher. They learn to smile on command, to speak softly, even when every nerve is screaming. You notice how silence becomes a kind of armor here. It's the only thing that can't be confiscated. Each comfort station has its own hierarchy. The Japanese soldiers are customers. The officers' wives sometimes act as managers, and local collaborators handle supplies. Some of these collaborators are women themselves caught between survival and complicity. They distribute rations, keep records, and pretend not to hear the crying behind the doors. It's an ecosystem built on denial. You walk through the corridor and glimpse a logbook open on a desk. The handwriting is elegant, neat, almost artistic. It lists dates, numbers hours. Beside it, a kettle whistles quietly. There's something nauseating about the normalcy of it all, as if evil decided to clock in early and stay late. Sometimes soldiers drink too much and lose control. Other times, they just follow routine. For the women, every knock on the door feels like a storm. You can't predict sometimes. Quiet, sometimes violent, always violating. When they aren't serving, they clean, cook, or mend uniforms. They have no time, no privacy, and no names that belong to them anymore. Only nicknames assigned by soldiers, Hanayuki number 5. Names that make them easier to forget. A Japanese nurse named Aiko once wrote in her diary, they called it comfort, but every sound in that place was a cry. Her words were never meant for the world to read, but decades later, historians would find them tucked in an attic in Yokohama. You wonder if she ever forgave herself for looking away. The Empire's paperwork paints it differently. Reports to Tokyo mention controlled facilities, medical regulation, disciplinary success. You can almost imagine the meetings men in uniforms sipping tea while discussing morale management. They probably believed they were improving efficiency, never realizing they were inventing a new form of organized cruelty. Sometimes the women are moved from one base to another. They travel in trucks or trains marked as logistics units. The soldiers guarding them smoke casually, laughing about their next destination. You look at the women through the slats in the truck's wooden frame, their faces blank, their eyes unfocused, their hands gripping each other's sleeves like the last thread of sanity. At night, after the soldiers leave and the lamps go dim, a strange kind of quiet settles in. It's not peace, it's the absence of noise after too much of it. Some women stare at the ceiling until dawn. Others whisper to each other, trading fragments of who they used to be, what their villages smelled like after rain, what songs their mothers used to sing. These small exchanges become lifelines. Every once in a while, one of them tries to escape. A few succeed, blending into nearby villages, hiding in forests, or pretending to be laborers. But most are caught within days. Punishments vary. Some are beaten, some locked without food, some never seen again. The rest learn to stop trying. You'd think the soldiers might feel something, guilt, disgust, anything. And some do. A few write about it later, saying the system corrupted them, made them forget they were human. But in the moment, power dulls empathy. When everything is sanctioned by the flag, morality becomes optional. It's strange how bureaucracy can sterilize brutality. The comfort stations weren't underground crimes. They were built into the Army's official structure. Doctors examined the women. Weekly officers signed rosters. Payrolls were processed. It was all recorded, stamped, filed away. You could find invoices for soap disinfectant and even replacement furniture, but not a single word about the suffering those objects witnessed. And still, amid all this control, chaos seeps in. Disease spreads, morale cracks, soldiers lose battles, and the Empire begins to overextend itself. Yet the system continues unflinching. Like a machine that doesn't care, its operators are dying. Sometimes when you close your eyes in those rooms, you can almost hear the tick of a pocket watch, a sound that might once have comforted someone. But here it's a countdown to what no one knows. The Empire has made sure the clock keeps running even if everyone inside wishes it would stop. You lose track of time in those rooms. Days, nights, and seasons blend together until the only clock left is your heartbeat. Survival becomes less about hope and more about math. How many soldiers visit? How many minutes of sleep you can steal? How many times you can pretend you're somewhere else before the next knock on the door? At first, some women try to count the days, marking tiny scratches on the wall behind their cots, but eventually they stop. The lines blur. The calendar doesn't matter, and even the concept of tomorrow starts to feel like a cruel rumor. You start to notice how each woman builds her own quiet strategy. One learns to smile automatically, not out of joy, but because it keeps her from being beaten. Another becomes obsessed with cleaning the floor, maybe because control over dirt is the only control she has left. Someone else stops speaking entirely. Silence becomes her rebellion. They all develop ways to leave without leaving. Some drift into their memories. The scent of pine needles near home, the rhythm of a lullaby, the feeling of a warm bowl of rice in their hands. It's not escape exactly. It's survival in slow motion. You might think that the human spirit collapses under such weight, but weirdly, it bends instead. The body becomes a vessel, the mind a fortress. You've probably heard the phrase mind over matter, right? Here it's not motivational, it's literal. They survive because they have no other option. There are stories of women sharing small kindnesses when they think no one's watching, hiding a spoonful of rice for someone who's sick, whispering jokes to each other in the dark, braiding each other's hair when the guards aren't looking. They trade memories like currency because it's the only thing they can still afford. One woman, historians later learn, her name was Kim Hak-sun, becomes known for quietly humming the same song every night. Nobody knows the lyrics, but everyone recognizes the melody. It's faint, fragile, and somehow defiant. Decades later, when she becomes the first former comfort woman to speak publicly in 1991, people realize that same song had been her anchor all along. Imagine holding on to a single tune for 50 years just to stay sane. Sometimes the women whisper about what they'll do when the war ends. I'll open a tea house, one says. I'll study medicine, another dreams. A third jokes that she'll never marry, because who needs men after this? For a few moments they laugh, and that laughter, small as it is, cuts through the suffocating air like sunlight sneaking under a door. But those moments don't last. Soldiers rotate in and out. The women stay. Food runs low. Disease spreads faster than rumors. The army brings in doctors to inspect the women weekly, not for their well-being, but to keep the soldiers healthy. Medical efficiency, the reports call it. You can't decide which word is colder, medical, or efficiency. In a strange way, you realize the system doesn't even see them as women anymore, just as maintenance equipment to be kept functional for the sake of the troops. They're inspected, disinfected, replaced. When one dies, another arrives. It's not tragedy anymore. It's routine. That's how horror hides best under the disguise of normalcy. Still, amid this daily grind of despair, you start to notice a paradox. The more the Empire tries to erase their humanity, the stronger that humanity becomes in secret. You catch a glimpse of two women sharing a stolen sweet potato, their faces lit with a kind of mischief that no uniform can kill. You see one woman teaching another how to write her name again, tracing invisible letters in the air. These are tiny rebellions, but they matter. It reminds you of something you've probably done in your own life, holding on to a little ritual when everything else feels out of control. Maybe it's your morning coffee, your favorite playlist, your quiet walk home. For these women, that ritual might be braiding hair, reciting a poem, or whispering a prayer. It's how they remember they're still people. Sometimes, even the soldiers notice. A few, barely older than the women themselves, start to avert their eyes or leave small tokens, a fruit, a folded note, a single apology muttered too quietly to count. You wonder if they're trying to confess or just survive their own guilt. Either way, those gestures fade fast. Orders are orders. As the war drags on, exhaustion becomes everyone's shadow. The Empire keeps fighting on too many fronts, losing too much ground. But the comfort stations remain open, unchanged, untouched, still humming with that same mechanical rhythm. And in that strange twilight between cruelty and collapse, you see something remarkable, the will to live becoming stronger than the will to obey. One woman hides scraps of paper, writing down names of others who've died. Another memorizes faces so she can tell their stories someday. She doesn't know it yet, but she's preserving history itself, the kind that the Empire will later try to erase. When dawn breaks, the women wash their faces with cold water, straighten their clothes, and prepare for another day that looks exactly like the one before. Yet each one carries something invisible, a stubborn spark that refuses to go out. You can't see it, but it's there. Because even in places designed to break the human soul, someone always figures out how to keep it alive. You start to notice that resistance doesn't always look like shouting or fighting. Sometimes it looks like a whisper, or a glance, or just the refusal to die quietly. By now, the war has dragged on too long, and even the Empire's confidence is cracking like an old porcelain bowl. The soldiers are thinner, the rations smaller, and the promises emptier. But in the dim rooms of the comfort stations, something unexpected is happening. Tiny rebellions bloom like weeds between concrete. One woman refuses to use the Japanese name she's been assigned. Every time a soldier calls her Yuki, she answers only to her real one, Sujin. It's small, maybe even foolish, but it's hers. Another woman begins stealing bits of soap from the officer's washroom, carving tiny flowers into them and hiding them under her cot. She says she's making a garden invisible, but real. There's a story about one station in the Philippines where the women secretly shared information with local resistance fighters. They smuggled notes in laundry baskets, sometimes passing warnings to villages before the army arrived. They risked everything for people they barely knew. Think about that, the kind of courage it takes to help strangers while you can't even save yourself. Every act, no matter how small, becomes a statement, I still exist. You haven't erased me yet. They teach each other lullabies from home, turning them into secret codes. They make up stories to keep hope alive about rain after drought, about ships that will one day bring them home. They whisper them like bedtime tales, not for children, but for themselves. You watch one woman sit by the window, if you can call it that. It's more a slit in the wall, and she stares at the moon every night. The same moon shines over Korea, she says. Another adds, and over China too. For a brief second, the moon becomes a shared rebellion, a reminder that something beyond the Empire still exists. A soldier once confiscated a small Bible from a Dutch girl held in a station near Indonesia. He tossed it aside, not realizing she had used its margins to write down the names of others who'd died. Decades later, when the war was over, that Bible was found buried near the site. The ink was faded, but the names remained, proof that someone remembered. Even in the thick of cruelty, the women find strange humor to survive. They nickname one particularly strict officer Mr. Polished Shoes, because he checks his reflection more than he checks the reports. They laugh quietly, but that laughter, light and trembling, feels like an act of defiance. Sometimes, humor is the last weapon left when dignity has been stripped away. A few manage to escape. One sneaks out during a bombing raid. Another hides among medical supplies on a truck headed north. Some are rescued by local villagers who risk their own lives to shelter them. But for most, freedom isn't a door they can run through. It's a thought they rehearse in silence. And the irony, the Empire's obsession with control starts to turn against itself. Orders pile up, communication breaks down, soldiers grow restless. When the women see their captors stumble, even for a moment, something shifts in the air. A quiet satisfaction, almost a smirk. For once, they aren't the ones trembling. You think of modern life, maybe your own small acts of rebellion, standing up to a boss who's wrong, walking away from something toxic, saying no when silence would be easier. The scale is different, but the heartbeat is the same. Resistance, after all, begins the same way everywhere, a simple refusal to disappear. Among the women, small miracles start to happen. One finds a scrap of paper, another a stub of pencil. Together, they write a letter that will never be mailed. To my mother, it begins. If you ever find this, know I was here. They fold it, hide it under the floorboards. Years later, when the building is abandoned, someone will find it and history will regain one of its lost voices. Then there are the songs. When guards aren't listening, the women sing not loudly, but enough to remind each other they're still human. They harmonize in different languages, creating a sound that doesn't belong to any one nation. That sound, fragile and trembling, becomes a secret anthem for the forgotten. In another corner of the empire, a Japanese nurse named Fumiko writes in her notebook, "We were told not to see them as people, but I did. I still do." She hides that note between medical records, a silent apology in the middle of an empire that has none to give. Each story, each whisper, each act of defiance adds a small crack to the empire's mask of perfection. And though it doesn't look like victory, it is. Because when history tries to erase you, and you keep speaking anyway, even in silence, that's power. The war is turning. The empire's newspapers still boast of triumph, but the truth is leaking through. Ships sink, supplies vanish, soldiers retreat. And in those same comfort stations, where hope once felt impossible, the air shifts just slightly. The guards look nervous. The women notice. They can't celebrate, not yet, but they can feel something they haven't in years change. It starts faint, like the smell of rain before a storm. And though they don't know it, that storm is coming for everyone. You ever notice how people say the end of the war, like it's a finish line? Like one clean trumpet sounds, the flags come down, and everything bad just stops. But it doesn't. When Japan finally surrenders in 1945, the war doesn't end for everyone. For some, it just changes shape. For the women trapped inside the comfort stations, liberation doesn't arrive like a hero kicking down a door. It drifts in, quietly, confusingly, like a rumor that feels too good to trust. When the announcement of surrender comes crackling through the radios, soldiers freeze mid-sentence. Some weep, some burn documents, some just stare blankly at the floor. And in those suffocating rooms, the women listen too. They don't cheer, they don't cry, They just wait. Because when you've been lied to for years, freedom sounds a lot like another trick. The guards begin to vanish first. Trucks rumble off in the middle of the night. Officers disappear with boxes of files. Uniforms get buried in haste. The empire that once documented everything suddenly pretends nothing ever happened. You might think silence is peace, but here, silence is evidence. When the doors are finally left unlocked, the women step out, blinking at the sunlight, like people seeing the world for the first time in years. But there's no parade waiting, no rescue teams, just the smell of gunpowder and rot, and the distant sound of soldiers retreating. Some women wander aimlessly, others collapse on the spot. They are free technically, but what does free even mean when the world you're returning to doesn't know you anymore? A few are taken in by local villagers, fed, clothed, treated with a compassion they haven't felt in forever. Others try to make their way home walking for days, begging for transport, sleeping under bridges. Along the way, they meet other survivors, each carrying the same invisible weight. They don't talk much. You don't need words when everyone's eyes tell the same story. But home isn't home anymore. Families terrified of shame sometimes turn them away. You've been with the soldiers, they whisper, as if survival itself were a crime. The women don't argue, they're too tired. Some change their names, move to cities, try to disappear. Others marry quietly, never telling their husbands the truth. And some, perhaps the bravest, speak only to be silenced again. In post-war Japan, the story of the comfort women vanishes faster than it ever appeared. The new government wants to rebuild the Allies, wants stability, and nobody wants to open the door to a room full of ghosts. Newspapers focus on economic recovery, not accountability. Textbooks skip the chapter entirely. History, it seems, has an excellent memory for victory and a terrible one for guilt. The same empire that once cataloged everything suddenly loses its files. Records are destroyed in air raids, testimonies, inconclusive responsibility, unclear. Bureaucracy becomes a magician again, making entire crimes disappear with the stroke of a pen. Meanwhile, across Asia, the survivors grow old quietly. Many never tell anyone what happened. Some become nuns, others merchants, others mothers. But the past doesn't vanish. It lingers like smoke clinging to every breath. You can imagine it, a woman sitting by her window, decades later, watching her grandchildren play, wondering if the world ever learned the truth. In South Korea, there's a phrase survivors use to say, "I came back," but not completely, because part of them never left that room, the part that knew her name, her song, her sense of safety. Healing doesn't follow the calendar. It's not like war medals or treaties. It doesn't have a date stamped on it. You'd think the victors would care. But the Allies, busy redrawing borders and writing treaties, treat the comfort system like an unfortunate wartime necessity. Justice becomes selective. The Tokyo War Crimes Tribunal, held in 1946, mentions atrocities, yes, but the comfort stations, barely a whisper. The women's stories are too inconvenient for a world that wants closure, so they keep living. Some become voices for peace, others sink into quiet survival. You might pass one on a street in Seoul or Manila in the 1950s, a woman selling vegetables, humming softly, no one realizing she once survived an empire's machinery. She doesn't tell you because she knows you wouldn't want to hear it. People like need endings. Her story doesn't have one. But time has a strange way of demanding truth. Decades later, when Japan's economy booms and the world praises its progress, a small group of elderly women decide they're done with silence. They step forward, trembling, nervous, but unbroken. They give interviews, hold press conferences, show their faces. We were there, they say. We were real. And for the first time, the world begins to listen. One of them, Kim Hak-soon, the same woman who used to hum in the dark, becomes the first to testify publicly in 1991. She's calm, measured, almost gentle in her words, but every sentence cuts through decades of denial. I was taken, she says simply. I want an apology. It's not revenge she asks for, just acknowledgement. Her testimony shatters the dam. Other women step forward from the Philippines, China, Indonesia, Taiwan, the Netherlands. The stories are different, but the echo is the same. The world gasps not because it didn't know, but because now it can't pretend not to. You might call that courage. But if you ask them, they'd just call it exhaustion, being tired of pretending it never happened. After all, silence protects the abuser, never the abused. So, as Japan rebuilds skyscrapers and exports electronics, a different kind of reconstruction begins elsewhere, the rebuilding of memory. Survivors gather evidence, journalists dig into archives, historians connect the dots the empire hoped were erased. And through it all, those same women once erased, once unnamed, begin to write themselves back into history, not as victims, but as witnesses. And that, in its own quiet way, is a revolution. So you keep walking with them, these grandmothers who refuse to shrink, and you watch how a living whisper turns into a movement with a microphone. It begins with press conferences in cramped rooms where the tea is lukewarm and the cameras click like anxious insects. You see Kim Hak-soon's calm voice ripple outward in 1991, drawing others from Manila, Taipei, Nanjing, Jakarta, and even Dutch survivors from the former East Indies. It's not a tidal wave at first. It's a heartbeat, steady, undeniable, and suddenly public. Then come the Wednesday gatherings in Seoul. You stand across from the Japanese embassy, the winter wind, biting through your coat, and count the yellow ribbons and handmade placards. Every Wednesday, rain, snow, election season, exam week, the survivors and their supporters show up. They are not loud for the sake of noise. They are rhythmic, patient, stubborn, in the way a metronome is stubborn. You ask yourself, how many weeks does it take for a state to hear a sentence that's simple, acknowledge us? The answer, apparently, is more than any of us would guess. Inside, offices, governments start choosing their verbs very carefully. You learn quickly that the world can be divided into two kinds of statements, the kind that clarifies and the kind that fogs. In 1993, Japan issues what becomes known as the Kono Statement words that admit military involvement in establishing and managing the system and express apologies and remorse. It matters because official sentences shape official memory, yet even as you exhale, you see the fine print of politics forming apologies that live or die depending on who holds the microphone next election. 2 years later, the Asian Women's Fund appears, 1995. Private donations channeled through a quasi-official body letters of apology included medical and welfare support offered. To some survivors, help is help. To many others, the private nature feels like a dodge. You can feel the split in the air. Dignity is not a line item you can outsource. If you've ever been offered a "we're sorry" that arrives without the person actually saying we're responsible, you know the tone. It's the corporate refund without the confession. Meanwhile, the women take their stories to courtrooms. They file cases in Tokyo District Court, in The Hague for Dutch survivors, in Seoul and Manila, and beyond. In Japan, most suits are dismissed statutes of limitation sovereign immunity. jurisdictional puzzles that feel like labyrinths designed to exhaust the very people who already spent a lifetime exhausted. You sit through a hearing and realize procedure can be its own weather system, cold, precise, and indifferent to the temperature of human pain. So they go international. In 1996, you watch a UN Special Rapporteur Radhika Kumaraswamy issue a report that uses the language states hate seeing beside their names, military sexual slavery crimes against humanity. In 1998, another independent expert, Gay McDougall, sharpens the vocabulary further. The words matter. They draw a legal frame around a story many preferred to shelve, under sad but complicated. Now it's documented and actionable. You can almost hear law librarians shifting entire shelves to make room for what the grandmothers forced into the record. Journalists and historians join in archival finds, pay ledgers, transport orders, health inspection logs. Bureaucracy, once the shield becomes evidence. You remember the tidy handwriting in those station logbooks. Now those same strokes testify against the system they served. It's poetic in a quiet paperwork kind of way. Outside the legal arena, civil society grows louder and more deft. University teach-ins, traveling exhibits, public art projects. School clubs design brochures. Diaspora communities host screenings and panel talks. A pattern emerges where textbooks hesitate the street corner and the campus bulletin board refuse to. In the late 2000s, city councils across multiple countries debate memorials and plaques. Resolutions are passed. Some are challenged, others become landmarks. You watch how memory learns to rent multiple apartments, one in a museum, one on a sidewalk, one in the stubborn hearts of people who refuse to pass by with eyes down. Then there's the political theater. Parliaments issue motions. You remember a particular resolution in Washington in 2007 calling for an unambiguous apology. Similar gestures echo in Europe and Asia. Diplomats smile print statements and set them gently on the table, like fine china no one wants to chip. Meanwhile, survivors still travel with canes and medication, telling their stories into microphones, folding and unfolding the same grief until it fits into broadcast time. If you've ever prepped a presentation while managing pain, you understand the logistics of courage. Some breakthroughs feel promising, then wobble. The 2015 Japan ROC Agreement offers funds, and the phrasing of apology aims to call the matter final and irreversible. But memory does not obey treaties. Survivors object to being consulted. After the fact, civic groups protest, a foundation rises and then dissolves. You realize history's most consequential signatures are the ones the public chooses to honor every year, not just the ones that make the evening news once. Amid all this, you meet individuals who turn legal language into living legacy. A scholar in Tokyo quietly tutors students using materials the textbook won't print. A teacher in Busan invites a survivor to speak to a classroom of 15-year-olds' phones go silent, and for once, no one checks the clock. A Filipino filmmaker screens a documentary under a tarpaulin as monsoon rain hammers the roof. The audience stays anyway. Memory improvises. Justice, it seems, is a composer who works with whatever instruments show up. You also notice the emotional arithmetic shifting. Early on, the women ask for recognition and apology. Later, they insist on education, teach it, so it doesn't happen again. Eventually, the movement learns the cruel logistics of biology. Time runs faster than legislation. Each year, fewer survivors attend the Wednesday gathering. The empty chairs begin to preach their own sermon. Have you ever felt a room grow heavier when someone leaves it? That's what these vigils feel like, attendance by absence. And still, the pushback continues. Some politicians call the testimonies exaggerated, some activists face lawsuits, some textbooks quietly dilute paragraphs into footnotes. You learn the oldest trick in the Book of Denial. If you can't erase, minimize. If you can't minimize, distract. Yet every attempt at erasure triggers a counter-archive scans, interviews, timelines, open syllabi, high school clubs that fact-check in real time. The internet turns into a volunteer historian with endless stamina. By now, you've realized the battle for recognition is not a single courtroom victory or one perfect apology. It's a long choreography, statements, retractions, memorials, removals, lawsuits, translations, lesson plans, re-revisions, and the weekly practice of showing up. Justice in this story is less like a gavel and more like a drum, kept alive by the hands that refuse to stop beating it. Near the end of one long day, you help an elderly survivor down a set of Embassy District stairs. She squeezes your hand with surprising strength and says almost playfully, "Don't forget to remember." It sounds like a riddle until you realize she's giving you the whole assignment in 4 words, because recognition isn't just what states grant, it's what communities practice. So you promise her quietly, the way you promise yourself, you'll actually floss this year that you won't treat her life as a lesson only for exams or anniversaries. You'll keep it where it belongs in the daily vocabulary of what your town knows, what your children learn, what your timeline refuses to scroll past. And as you walk away from the rally, your scarf holding the day's cold like a souvenir, you understand the paradox that has guided the movement from its first trembling press conference. The more anyone tries to bury this truth, the more hands arrive with shovels. You think the story should be safe by now, written down, memorialized, taught. But memory is a slippery thing, especially when it makes powerful people uncomfortable. Walk into a modern Tokyo classroom, and you might be surprised by what you don't hear. The word ianfu, comfort women, barely appears in some history textbooks. When it does, it's softened, like a bruise airbrushed out of a portrait. Women who followed the army, one edition says, voluntary workers. You stare at the page and realize this is how history hides by changing its verbs. Outside the classroom, the debate rages louder. Politicians argue on talk shows. Newspapers run editorials with polite euphemisms like disputed claims, and activists counter with survivor testimonies printed on banners. It's strange watching a moral issue treated like a popularity poll. You'd think empathy wouldn't need fact-checking, but apparently it does. In the 1990s, as survivor movements grow stronger, Japanese nationalist groups begin pushing back harder. They call the women liars, foreign propaganda tools, even traitors to Japan. You read one of their pamphlets. It's slick, full of pseudo-academic citations and cheerful denial. The tone feels eerily familiar, like the corporate PR you'd read after a scandal. We acknowledge concerns, but deny wrongdoing. It's not just gaslighting, it's policy. Then come the textbook lawsuits. Scholars and teachers who include details about the comfort, women find themselves under pressure. Some books pulled, others revised. In 2001, a major publisher quietly deletes the term altogether after political complaints. The women's voices, recorded, documented, verified, become allegations again. It's almost impressive the way bureaucracy can unlearn compassion with such precision. And yet outside those classrooms, the truth refuses to fade. Activists keep showing up at city halls, universities, and art galleries. Artists sculpt bronze statues of the Peace Girl, a barefoot young woman sitting calmly in a chair an empty seat beside her for the ones who can't be there. The first statue stands in front of the Japanese embassy in Seoul, installed in 2011. It looks gentle, but make no mistake, it's defiance cast in metal. Japan's diplomats call the statues diplomatic irritants. Others call them sacred ground. People lay flowers, fold paper cranes, and hold vigils there. Sometimes the statues are vandalized or removed only to reappear somewhere else. San Francisco, Berlin, Sydney, even Glendale, California. It's like truth, playing a quiet game of hide-and-seek around the world, refusing to disappear, no matter how many times it's told to move along. You watch politicians argue over words again. One prime minister calls the women victims of wartime tragedy. Another insists there's no evidence of coercion. You can almost hear the rhetorical gymnastics, each phrase engineered to sound sympathetic, but legally safe. Meanwhile, survivors, now frail and soft-spoken, hold up photographs of their younger selves and ask the simplest question imaginable. If not us, then who were they? In one television interview, an elderly survivor from Taiwan smiles gently and says, "I'm not angry. I'm just waiting for honesty." It's such a small request that it makes your chest ache, because honesty shouldn't have to wait 80 years. And then, as if on cue, the internet era explodes. Hashtags, forums, and documentaries begin flooding the digital world with testimonies and scanned archives. Denial suddenly looks outdated next to digitized evidence, military contracts, transport logs, official correspondence. The same tools once used to spread propaganda now become instruments of preservation. A Korean university student starts a website compiling survivor interviews. Within months, it's translated into 5 languages. A Japanese teenager, after visiting a peace museum, posts a viral video explaining what her textbook didn't. You realize truth has found a Wi-Fi connection, and that's one revolution nobody budgeted for. Still, the denial persists. In 2014, a major Japanese newspaper retracts a series of old articles that confirmed military coercion, claiming verification issues. Nationalists celebrate it as vindication, even though independent historians reaffirm the evidence. You almost have to admire how denial like bamboo bends, but never quite breaks. Even outside Japan, revisionism has its fans. In 2017, you see debates in American cities over removing statues due to diplomatic pressure. Petitions appear, counter-petitions too. Every argument feels familiar: heritage versus memory, shame versus healing silence versus accountability. And the quiet irony: every time someone tries to erase the past, it ends up trending instead. If you zoom out, you start to see the pattern. Truth advances, denial retreats, then rebrands itself and returns. But slowly, inevitably, the survivor's side grows stronger. Museums are built, documentaries win awards, school programs expand. A teacher in Osaka sneaks survivor letters into her history lessons, saying, "If the book won't tell it, I will." In Seoul, a young artist installs hundreds of tiny bronze shoes in a public park, each one for a name never recorded. In their stillness, they speak louder than any protest chant, and yet the tension remains. Modern Japan is proud of its pacifism, its democracy, its art and technology, and rightfully so. But shadows don't disappear just because the lights are brighter. That's what makes this story so complex. An entire nation caught between pride and remorse, heritage and humanity. You walk through Yasukuni Shrine, where soldiers' names are honored, and you notice something missing: no plaques for the women who never came home. The air feels still reverent and uncomfortably selective. You leave a single yellow flower by the gate anyway. Maybe no one else will notice, but symbols don't need audiences, they just need witnesses. And you realize denial doesn't just try to rewrite history, it tries to exhaust it, to make people stop caring. But history inconveniently doesn't tire as easily as politicians hope. It waits quietly for the next person willing to look closer. So you promise yourself, standing under the dim glow of Tokyo's streetlights, that you'll keep looking. Because if forgetting is the final victory of those who caused the pain, then remembering, simply remembering, is how the world fights back. What if I told you some stories never die, no matter how carefully they're buried? You see it in the bronze statues, the empty chairs, the wrinkled hands that still tremble when microphones are passed their way. You see it in Seoul, where every Wednesday, yes, still survivors and students gather outside the Japanese embassy, holding banners that flutter like stubborn prayers. Some of the women are gone now, but their portraits rest in those empty chairs, staring calmly into history's eyes. The wind there is never quiet. It carries chants laughter, sometimes songs. High schoolers read poems they wrote. Tourists stop confused at first, then stay longer than planned. An old man passes by and bows deeply to the empty seat. And for a moment, you understand what survival really means. It's not just living through something, it's forcing the world to look at it afterward. A few meters away, journalists adjust cameras, their breath visible in the cold. One of them interviews a young student who says, "We can't change the past, but we can change who remembers it." You nod, because that's the kind of sentence that grows roots. Memory is activism now. It's no longer just about who did what. It's about who refuses to forget. You visit museums in Seoul, Nanjing, Taipei, and Osaka. Each has its own rhythm of silence. Glass cases filled with letters, worn shoes, a hair comb carved from wood. In one display, there's a diary written in faint pencil. Half of it smudged the last line, cut off mid-sentence. No translation needed. Absence speaks fluently. You stand there longer than you expect, realizing that these artifacts don't just tell stories, they hold the weight of all the apologies that never came. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, the conversation keeps shifting between denial and acceptance, between embarrassment and empathy. Younger generations start asking different questions. They form book clubs, join history circles, challenge their teachers respectfully but persistently. Some even march alongside Korean students at peace rallies, holding signs in both languages. The empire's silence may have once been law, but empathy doesn't need permission to exist. You fly to Los Angeles next, where another bronze statue stands in a quiet park. A little girl sits with her hands folded on her lap, eyes forward, calm. Beside her, that same empty chair. Flowers, origami cranes, handwritten notes in English, Japanese, Korean. One reads, "You are remembered, you are believed." It's simple, and that's what makes it beautiful. Nearby, a plaque tells the story, neutral words, factual dates, restrained emotion. But what strikes you isn't the text, it's the people reading it. A family with kids, a woman jogging who stops mid-step, a man eating lunch on the bench who closes his container and just listens. You realize memorials aren't about marble or bronze. They're about the pause they create in everyday life, that brief moment when history reaches out and taps your shoulder. And yet this story isn't finished. New controversies keep sparking, statues removed under political pressure, museums, defunded documentaries attacked online. The ghosts are still inconvenient, but every time someone tries to silence the past, another group of hands lifts it higher. Memory has momentum. You start to notice how language evolves too. Historians now prefer survivors over victims, testimonies over claims. Even the phrase comfort women feels too soft, too sanitized, so activists replace it with what it was: military sexual slavery. It's a mouthful uncomfortable, but that's the point. Truth isn't supposed to sit easily on the tongue. When you meet one of the last surviving women, she's in her late 90s. Her back is curved, but her voice, still steady, fills the small room. She says she's not angry anymore, just tired. "I don't need revenge," she tells you. "I just want them to teach the truth before we die." Then she laughs softly, adding, "We've been waiting since 1945. Maybe history just walks slow."
Stay with me now.
Her words stay with you. On the flight home, you think about how every civilization has stories like this. Truths once buried, now resurfacing like bones through soil. The question isn't whether nations can make peace with their past. It's whether they can tell the truth about it out loud. And maybe that's the hardest part, accepting that history isn't about villains and heroes, but about choices. Japan's story doesn't end in shame. It ends in whether it learns to listen. The rest of the world doesn't stand outside that equation either. Because denial isn't uniquely Japanese. It's human. Every country has its silences, its convenient forgettings. We all choose every day what kind of ancestors we'll be. You think about the survivors again. Their hands, their laughter, their names whispered into microphones. You think about how they spent decades shouting into a world that didn't want to hear. And now at last, their voices echo across classrooms, museums, documentaries, TikToks, memorials, and even bedtime history videos like this one. It's strange and beautiful the way the truth finally learned to travel. So here's the quiet reality: the empire failed to erase them. Bureaucrats burned the papers. Politicians rewrote the books, but the women remained. In every statue, in every testimony, in every child who grows up learning their names instead of their numbers, they live on. You walk away from the statue one last time, the night settling cool on your shoulders. A street light flickers. Somewhere, a busker strums a soft melody that sounds like the lullaby Kim Hak-sun once hummed in the dark. You stop, close your eyes, and listen. The war is long over, but the song remains. And maybe that's the best kind of justice the world can offer: the promise that they will never vanish again, not into silence, not into paperwork, not into polite denial. The truth finally belongs to them. As the lights dim and your mind drifts, remember them, not as ghosts of sorrow, but as voices that outlived empires. Their pain became history. Their silence became truth. And their memory now rests in your gentle breathing. Let the past fade softly, like waves against a quiet shore. Sleep peacefully. They are finally heard.
we proceed with this, there is no turning back. The future of Rome rests on your shoulders now.